The city woke slowly, its streets coated in the muted grays and ochres of early morning. Streetlights flickered off as sunlight crept between the buildings, washing the pavement with a pale, cinematic light. In this quiet hour, before the city's pulse reached its midday rhythm, the routines of those sworn to maintain order moved with an understated precision.
Timestamps on these
Among them,
the
Captain James Ellsworth was a figure defined by both habit and reputation. Within the walls of the police precinct, his presence was steady, unassuming, and commanding in the way that years of disciplined work can forge. He arrived before dawn, keying the locks with a familiarity born of decades, moving through corridors lined with plaques, commendations, and photographs that traced the department's own history. The hum of fluorescent lighting above mingled with the low thrum of distant traffic outside, creating a rhythm as constant and unremarkable as the beat of a heart. Ellsworth's career had been marked by a meticulous attention to detail, a precision that his colleagues relied upon without question. Promotions had come steadily, earned not through flair or spectacle, but through quiet competence and an unerring commitment to procedure. He walked past the briefing room where younger officers were already gathering, their notebooks open, pens poised, the air buzzing with the nervous energy of new recruits. He paused briefly to observe them, noting the subtle, instinctive corrections they made to one another's posture, the careful enunciation of their sentences, the tentative attempts to assert authority. There was a rhythm to these beginnings, a predictable unfolding of ambition within the structures he had long mastered. For Ellsworth, it was all familiar territory, a world in which procedure, hierarchy, and protocol formed the invisible scaffolding of order. At first, the series of bank robberies that would later come to define his career appeared routine. The initial reports were indistinct, cataloged alongside other crimes. A briefcase taken here, a teller threatened there, nothing to distinguish one event from the countless others already reported in the precinct's files. They were cases that might have slipped into anonymity, if not for the faint, persistent pattern threading them together. The robberies were methodical, lacking the chaotic violence that drew media attention, leaving behind only a thin trace of evidence and a growing unease among those who tracked such things. Ellsworth approached the files as he would any case, examining the reports with a calm, analytical eye. There was no urgency, only the slow accumulation of detail, a series of small, precise brushstrokes that, when viewed together, suggested a larger image just beyond the frame. The city itself seemed almost indifferent to the unfolding pattern. Streets bustled with commerce, and neighborhoods hummed with the routines of daily life. Yet beneath the surface, the robberies began to ripple outward, subtle disturbances in the otherwise steady flow of urban existence. Bank managers whispered among themselves, security cameras were reviewed with renewed diligence, and officers on routine patrol noted the minor anomalies that previously would have gone unnoticed. Ellsworth moved through this environment as both observer and actor, a man whose understanding of order was rooted in decades of immersion in its rhythms. He noted the psychological weight the crimes carried, the quiet fear they instilled, and the subtle erosion of confidence that even minor disruptions could impose on the public consciousness. Within the precinct, Ellsworth's colleagues held him in high regard. His reputation was a stabilizing force, a point of reference for officers navigating the complexities of law enforcement. Subordinates sought his counsel, not merely for the strategies he offered, but for the assurance of his presence, the knowledge that the machinery of justice could function under his guidance. Meetings with detectives unfolded with a deliberate cadence, the captain's calm assessments punctuating the often hurried or uncertain observations of others. He was both guide and guardian, a figure whose authority was exercised through restraint rather than display. The irony of the coming investigation, the fact that it would ultimately turn inward, challenging the very integrity it relied upon, lay dormant in this chapter of his life, hidden beneath layers of procedure, trust, and expectation. Ellsworth's own home mirrored the quiet discipline of his professional life. Mornings began with the precision of well-worn routine, black coffee poured into a chipped mug, a newspaper spread carefully across the kitchen table, each section read in a prescribed order. There were no surprises, no deviations. Even leisure followed an almost ritualized pattern. A walk along the river, a brief survey of the neighborhood, exchanges with familiar shopkeepers and neighbors who respected his work from a polite distance. The structure of his personal life reflected an internal need for stability, a psychological ballast that allowed him to carry the weight of his professional responsibilities without succumbing to anxiety. In these moments, there was a subtle irony that would only be understood later. An officer of the law, entrenched in routines of order, would find that order itself could be both a tool and a cage. The initial investigation proceeded without fanfare. Ellsworth oversaw evidence collection, interviews, and scene reconstructions with the detachment of a man confident in his method and experience. Photographs were examined, receipts traced, and security footage reviewed frame by frame. The work was slow, deliberate, a cinematic unfolding of mundane details that collectively carried the weight of consequence. There was tension beneath the surface, but it was not immediate or sensational. It was measured, rooted in the understanding that every procedural decision bore implications for justice, accountability, and the lives of those involved. In this, the narrative of the captain's world was not one of drama, but of inevitability, the quiet buildup of stakes beneath the calm exterior of professional life. By the time patterns began to emerge, the city had already internalized the initial disruption. People adjusted their routines subtly, banks tightened procedures, and officers on routine patrol grew more vigilant. Ellsworth remained a steady presence amidst this backdrop, his observations guided by both intuition and experience. There was an almost imperceptible shift in his perspective as he reviewed the accumulated evidence, a dawning awareness that the anomalies resisted simple explanation. Yet even here, the tone remained observational, restrained. Suspicion had not yet taken root in any dramatic form. It was a slow, creeping awareness, a mental calibration that would lay the foundation for deeper scrutiny. In the quiet of the precinct, Ellsworth allowed himself brief moments of reflection. He considered the responsibilities inherent in his role, the trust invested in him by colleagues, the community, and the institution itself. The weight of that trust was tangible, an invisible force pressing upon every decision, every judgment, every allocation of attention. There was no panic, no moral alarm, only the steady, relentless pressure of accountability, the knowledge that the machinery of law enforcement functioned best under calm, focused guidance. The eventual inversion of the investigation turning inward to implicate the captain himself was still unseen, yet it hung like a dormant shadow in the corners of the narrative. As morning gave way to midday, the city's rhythms accelerated. Traffic thickened, pedestrians filled the sidewalks, and the hum of commerce rose to a steady pitch. Within the precinct, the day's work continued with procedural certainty. Captain Ellsworth moved through his duties with measured attention, overseeing reports, guiding investigations, and maintaining the steady emotional register that defined his leadership. The chapter closes not with revelation or spectacle, but with quiet observation, a city in motion, a captain in his element, and the subtle, almost imperceptible stirrings of a story that would, in time, bend toward irony, tension, and the profound challenges of trust, authority, and human fallibility. The stage is set, not with drama, but with calm inevitability, and the narrative begins its slow, deliberate ascent